Hi, I'm Hazel, and today we're taking a look at the September 23rd batch of class balancing hotfixes and what it means for all of us in the Emerald Nightmare. So these changes were announced on the 23rd, but won't actually be going live until the next raid reset on Tuesday, September 27th. Because they're not out quite yet, there may still be changes before they go live on Tuesday. They also unveiled a new set of PvP hotfixes in the same post, which is part of a different conversation and not what we're going over here. Frost Death Knights are receiving buffs across the board, with their Remorseless Winter being buffed by a whopping 50%. Frost DK has been significantly behind Unholy throughout early Legion, and this should help them catch up a bit. Hopefully, after these changes go in, people will become a little bit more open-minded about bringing Frost Death Knights to Mythic dungeons. Demon Hunters are getting some painful nerfs. Throw glaive damage is being cut by 30%, while a number of talents and artifact traits are getting reined into. There's no doubt that Demon Hunters have been doing really strong cleave damage in the first month of Legion, so the idea here is to pull them back closer to the rest of the classes. It's still a bit of a nasty kick to the folks who took a risk and committed to changing mains for Demon Hunter though. Vengeance is getting adjusted also. Their mastery takes a heavy hit with providing 50% less damage reduction per point. To compensate for that, the damage reduction of Demon Spikes is being increased to 20%. This should limit how strong a Vengeance player can get with stacked mastery, and drops mastery down somewhat in their stat priority. Hopefully they didn't spend too much on their enchants. Balanced Druids are getting some minor damage buffs. In my personal experience, I've seen most Moonkins in my pugs and dungeon groups struggling to keep up a little bit, so hopefully this brings them to a better place. Arcane Mages are getting a big buff to their mastery, and minor buffs to Arcane Missiles and Arcane Blast. Frost Mages have widespread buffs to many of their core abilities also. The idea here is to bring Arcane and Frost up closer to where Fire Mages are at. I've heard whispers that some Fireheads are starting to squiggle away some artifact power into off-spec weapons for certain fights, so it must be working. Marks and BM Hunters are getting a 20% nerf to Barrage, which should make it less of a default talent choice. BM Hunters will get over it pretty fast, because they're getting a fat 25% buff to their core Bestial Wrath damage. Marks has no such luck. Survival is getting one big buff to their Flanking Strike, which is having its damage increased by 62%. Mistweaver Monks are having their Spinning Crane Kick damage reduced. And that's it. Everything else to do with Monks is untouched. I'm a little surprised that they're not bringing down Windwalker Monks, but it makes sense with their recent reluctance to nerf things. They seem keen on buffing everyone else up to par, rather than bringing one spec down wherever they can avoid it. Holy Priests are getting a Holy Nova nerf with its damage reduced by 16%. Having played a bit of Holy in dungeons, I can say that this is probably called for. Holy Nova's been doing a bizarrely strong amount of damage. Shadow Priests are getting some big changes. First, Mindseer damage and Insanity gen has been increased by 50%. This is sorely needed seeing as Mindseer currently hits like a wet noodle that's kind of soggy and doesn't even really want to be a noodle anymore. It's really bad. What I'm hoping this buff does is bring it so that Mindseer becomes the correct choice on 4 or more targets, but not for less than that. We'll see. Next, Void Form stacks no longer increase while Dispersion and Void Torrent are active. This is definitely a nerf, and it changes the way you play Shadow. Because Dispersion paused Insanity Drain and allowed Void Form stacks to keep climbing, it had become a DPS cooldown which tended to make it not available as a defensive. I'm okay with them nerfing this because I'd rather hang on to my Dispersion as a way to handle raid mechanics for my team without giving up potential damage. Unfortunately, caught in the wake of fixing Dispersion was our favorite buddy Void Torrent. Void Torrent is a channel where you're committing to staying still, and if you move, you just ruined a damage spike that won't come back for another minute. It paused Insanity Drain and let your stacks keep climbing, making you feel like this badass cultist invoking something that you probably shouldn't be messing with. This change to Void Torrent means we'll be coming out of it without any more stacks than we went in with, even though we just committed a bunch of time to wiggling the dagger around. This reduces how many stacks you come out of the average Void Form with, and it's a decent blow to our overall damage. If that wasn't enough, they're also capping the benefit of Mass Hysteria at 100%. This basically decapitates the top end of our damage, where really skilled priests were able to surrender to madness and stack up frightening levels of Void Form before dying horribly. This should stop priests from doing excessive damage with surrender to madness, but when there's no opportunity at all for greatness, it begs the question of why we're killing ourselves with this talent in the first place. Your average priest in LFR isn't going to be managing Surrender to Madness and mechanics well enough to stack Mass Hysteria past 100 anyways, so this nerf is really targeted at skilled and high-end raiders. It'll take time to see the full impact of these hotfixes. I really hope that should these nerfs push Shadow back underneath, that they take another look before we drown completely. With that rant out of the way, look at Rat Paladins. They're getting some buffs. Like frost decays, reds have been a bit sneered at for their numbers so far, so this should help them reclaim their dignity. Even before the buffs, I've seen some rets trying their hearts out and pulling decent numbers, so once they're tuned up, they'll be really scary. Rogue time. Death from above for all rogues is getting its area damage increased by 100%. That should make it quite a bit more attractive. Assassination and subtlety rogues are getting a variety of buffs intended to get them closer to outlaw. Some of outlaw's artifact traits are getting brought down also. Ever since they added Roll the Bones to the game, they've been fighting with how to make it good enough that bad rolls don't ruin your day, without making good rolls excessively strong. Spoilers, they can't. Maybe these changes to Assassin Subtlety will give all the people that want to quit gambling a nice place to go. LE Shamans are seeing some pretty big buffs, including 23% to both Chain Lightning and Lightning Bolt. That should zap them up the meters. I'm sorry. Enhancement has had a bug fix that was giving them too much Wind Fury, but the base Wind Fury activation was increased, so it doesn't feel too bad post-bug fix. Overall, it should level out to a very mild improvement. Chain Lightning damage for Resto Shamans has also been increased by 23% because why not? There is a giant novel of Warlock buffs to a huge amount of abilities. All 3 specs have been underperforming so far in Legion, so the hope is that this makes them good again. What this doesn't address is the mechanical clunkiness that many players have been complaining about, especially with Demonology. However, if the numbers are high enough, people will deal with anything. Regardless, I hope the die-hard Warlocks that have stuck with it this far are happy. Arms Warriors are getting a nerf to the Focused Rage talent and Exploit the Weakness artifact trait, so their damage should drop by a bit. On the flip side, Fury is seeing some moderate buffs with Rampage and Bloodthirst up by 12%, among other things. This should even up the 2 warrior specs without changing things too drastically. Prot Warriors are seeing big nerfs to their Rage generation and the effectiveness of their Vengeance talent. My experience so far healing Prot Warriors is that I haven't, because Ignore Pain is so good and has such a high uptime that they pretty much take care of themselves. After these changes, they're going to be quite a bit tighter in Rage and they may not be able to keep it up quite as much. So that's what's coming your way on Tuesday the 27th of September. Damage specs that are conspicuously missing from this list are Feral Druids, Unholy DKs, Windwalker Monks, and Fire Mages. That's either an indicator that Blizzard is happy with where those specs are at, or that they don't have a strong plan for exactly how they want to fiddle with them just yet. It'll be interesting to see over the coming weeks if these hotfixes pan out as intended. Blizzard has shown that they're not afraid of tuning and retuning whenever necessary, so this is far from the end of it. They've stated in a tweet that they're still looking at what needs adjusting, particularly with Shadow Priests and Havoc Demon Hunters, and following constructive discussions. If you have strong feelings about these hotfixes, get yourself to the official forums and express yourself in the most civil and constructive manner that you can manage. As with every round of nerfs and buffs, they're bound to have ruffled somebody's feathers. Let me know what you think, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye!